Hi, this is Carl from Plughugger and this is Atomica from Cherry Audio. Atomica is a software reproduction of the old Soviet Polivoks synth from the early 80s. Just some technical info so that we know what we're dealing with here. At its core, the original was a quite simple two-oscillator synth with a multi-mode filter, envelopes and an LFO. It was duophonic, in other words, you could play the two oscillators polyphonically. Apart from its duo polyphonicness, it had three things that stood out. First was a loopable envelope. The second, simple FM via oscillator 2 cross modulation. And thirdly, a filter that was born in Mount Doom in Mordor. Now, some 40 years later, Cherry Audio comes along and feel like the time is ready for a modern version. And while the Polivoks have never really been on my radar, I am now a fully licensed member of the Polivoks cult. All hail Polivoks!
All hail Polivoks!
What I like about Cherry Audio is that they keep the same fundamental mentality with their emulations as GeForce. They keep the original core of the synth intact, but enforce it with carefully selected improvements. The obvious improvements in the case of Atomica is that it is fully polyphonic with up to 16 voices. But you can turn all those voices into one massive beam of sound with the unison function. It has a pretty formidable effects section, but more of that later. For me, is usually in the smaller details which provides greatness, and here two things stand out. The effect section can be modulated, yes, modulated, with a separated dedicated LFO, which often is regarded as a dark ninja art even among seasoned sound designers. But the price of the best and most important addition compared with the original is that the filter have been expanded in ways you feel the people behind Atomica have a deep understanding about the synth. Firstly, they have expanded the amount of filter modes. On the original you only had low pass and band pass, but now you also have high pass, notch and peak. Okay, That's not bad, but somewhat expected in this day and age. I agree. So here comes the thing that puts everything on its head. You can adjust the aggressiveness of the filter. This feature alone probably increases the type of sounds you can make with Atomica by the double or more. From razor-fisted hardcore kicks to analog-style bass drums that actually sounds like a kick. Last time I saw something similar was with UHI Repro, which lets you change the filter circuitry to a handful of different models. It's extremely useful to be able to dial back the otherwise larger-than-life character of the filter. An interesting thing is that if you dial it back as much as you can, the filter almost starts to feel broken. But if fat is your thing, this is your baby. You can put it into overdrive by using the filter drive, and if that wasn't enough, you can overdrive the amplifier as well. If you think that Atomica is excellent for fat basses and cutting leads, you are, of course, right. But there is a whole other dimension here. While Atomica doesn't have the king of ambient waveforms, the sine wave, among its waveforms, it has the second best thing, a nice sounding triangle. And thanks to the adjustable filter, you can make some very beautiful tones, especially with the reverb. By the way, none of the sounds in this video review are from the factory content. All the sounds you hear I made for this video, and they can all be downloaded from my Patreon. Making sounds with Atomica is easy. It never hinders you with hidden menus or parameters. Sound creation is very direct. You set the tone with the oscillators, you shape it with the envelopes and filter, and you add a layer of effects to give the sounds more movement and dimension. Done. Technically speaking, It's more advanced than something like a Juno or SH-101 and kind of the same level as a Prophet 5. It's easy to use, yet there is depth and room to grow. The effects section is one of the best I've seen in a Cherry synth. Usually Cherry is quite restrictive with effects, but here you got a phaser, a flanger/chorus, a delay that can do analog tape style, and a competent reverb. Among modulation effects, chorus is always on the top of my list, as you can use it for a poor man's unison, or induce vintage tremolo effects and instability to a sound. But with Atomica, the phaser scored really high for me, with a very pleasant tone. And that you can modulate some selected parameters with a dedicated LFO opens the door to interesting organic fluctuations, instability, to ear-bending madness, which was something I did not expect. But Carl, you bloody sound nerd, isn't there anything you had problems with? Sure, actively looking for things to be annoyed with is a sport we all play. Number 1. The interface presents you with a seemingly endless, almost hypnotic row of similar looking knobs. Sure, the sections are divided into clear blocks, but initially I felt keeping true to the style of the original design just made things messier. Maybe using different colored knobs, shades perhaps, would have made things clearer. But as I have said over the years, I rarely care about my own feelings about synth interfaces any longer. My practical experience is that just after a couple of sessions you don't even see the buttons and the knobs and you are just moving around seamlessly. Number 2. I never understood why some developers like to put borders around the plugin. For me, that feels like wasted space rather than bringing something useful. In all honesty though, I care about that less than I care about the color of my socks. But still, I never understood it. Number 3. At times, I really wished for a separate high-pass filter, like on the Juno, just to be able to tame the low end. You have a bandpass filter, but I've never been a fan of bandpass filter. There, I said it. My ultimate shame. All hail band. Yeah. This have been an excellent year for smaller, characterful synthesizers. GeForce have brought two absolute bangers in Poscar 3 and OB1. Waldorf recently came out with an excellent microwave reproduction, and Cherry earlier this year with Chroma and the CR78 drum machine. You who know me knows that I much prefer to have multiple smaller synths that are specialized in certain things than one synth that does everything. Not because the bigger ones are bad in any way, but because the time it takes to make a certain type of sound with a smaller and dedicated synth is way shorter. To make a really nasty bass sound with something like Atomica takes under a minute. To do the same with Omnisphere, Zebra or Pigments takes longer. You have to select filter, decide on the internal amp staging, etc. and so on. It's doable, but less fluid. Without a doubt, the filter is the star of the Atomica. There are more filter types than the original, but also deeper control of its characteristics. You find the filter too hard and gnarly? Tone it down a bit. You can go from uber-hard to beefy to strong. Never quite meek though. There is still a bit of a weird maybe I drank one too many cup of coffee feel to even the lowest setting. If I were to point to just one feature of the Atomica I found to be the crowning jewel, this is it. The filter, which is outstanding, outrageous, and unpredictable. And if you hear anyone complain that Cherry audio synth sounds all the same, you have my permission to slap them with a wet fish and kindly ask them to check their ears. While Atomica can competently move from mellow ambient to Chemical Brothers-inspired hard-hitting basses and synths, it is in the latter category where Atomica is in its best environment. It's not for every occasion, but when you take a bite, you know you're into something special. I like this one a lot. 5 out of 5 spicy sausages.